Okay, we are live now. Welcome everyone. This is the panel and virtual DDD conference about remote trainings and other related topics. Welcome everyone. My name is Kacper. I will be your host for today, and we have a couple of ground rules to go through first. So this is an interactive panel, so I'd like to encourage everyone to ask your questions, join this call. There are several ways to do this. One of them is using the Q&A. So if you would like to just ask the question, you don't want to join the discussion, please ask a question on the Q&A board. I will be then marking these questions as answered once that's done. Other way of asking a question, if you are watching us on YouTube, is to put a comment in the live chat. I will be monitoring that as well. And the third way of contributing is by raising hands. So on the participant list on Zoom, on the bottom right corner, there is raise hand button. If you do that, I'll make you a panelist and you will be able to talk with us. So that's all. If you want to discuss any of the topics that we'll be touching on today, there is also a Slack channel on DDD Secures ES Slack, and the channel is called Virtual DDD, and also we have a Twitter hashtag, so you can talk about the conference there. I think that's it. So maybe you can start with Zsofia. Can you please introduce yourself, Zsofia?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Zsofia. I am working as a product manager and actually also looking at the whole DDD from this angle for 3 years already, and really a big fan of modeling and all the workshops. This situation made my life harder too, actually. So I haven't done any training sessions remotely outside my work since this COVID situation is existing. But still, with my colleagues and with the teams at my company, I keep the training and modeling sessions going. So this is how I relate into this conversation and how I am excitedly waiting about what we are discussing about these remote trainings, because still with the colleagues it needs to work out, right? So that's it from me yet.
All right. So maybe I'll go next because I'm next on the thumbnail list. So my name is Kacper. I'm an independent consultant and trainer. So I was doing some remote training sporadically during the past 4 years, but because of the recent situation, I was forced to do more of them and rethink how I'm delivering the training. So that will be also a good learning opportunity for me to to exchange the opinions, share with you what I learned, and also pick up new ideas. Thank you, Stefan.
Hi, I'm Stefan from Germany. I'm an IT consultant and trainer. I've discovered DDD like 10 or whatever, 15 years ago, and sort of got dragged more and more into those ideas. Still, I'm not like the classical DDD type of consultant or trainer. We usually do mostly web-related stuff, open source technologies around the PHP technology stack. And I used to think that you need to get on site and be in the same room with the people. Otherwise, you cannot convince them. So that's where I'm coming from. Of course, I did some remote stuff over the years, but it never felt that good to me. And then came the coronavirus, and that kind of forced us to rethink everything. And here we are. So I'm really curious to see how this conversation is going to be evolving.
Thank you. Gien?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gien. I am also an independent consultant. I have been working with a remote team for almost 2 years now. Besides that, I'm trying to get a master's degree in long distance education, which also basically means getting a remote master's degree. And I am currently trying to create a virtual first workshop with Nicktoon, because of the quarantine that we're all in.
Thank you. And our last person on this panel is Michael. You are muted.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Plöd. I work as a fellow for a consulting company called InnoQ, and I did a lot of, I would say, formal domain-driven design trainings in the past. Those were mainly 3-day courses, and then suddenly the virus struck, and we were forced to go remote everything. So I actually transformed my training to a complete remote version and did that a couple of times with very positive results, I have to say. I was very happy with that.
All right. I think that's everyone, Michael, so I think you can carry on.
Me?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things when going for remote trainings, what I had the impression it wouldn't work in a way that you just transform the in-person training and do the same thing in a remote way. So I thought very hard, and we came up with a bunch of questions. What are suitable formats and times for remote trainings? Which tools work best? Yeah, what's the what should you do? How do you do exercises in those trainings? I mean, because as a trainer in a in-person setup, you always see the interactions between people. You see many emotions. You realize, who am I losing as a trainer, content-wise? Yeah, because people are more on their smartphone or whatever, and you see questions being asked and so on, and you don't have that in a remote fashion. So what I did in my trainings was to cut it shorter in shorter intervals and do more retrospectives where I ask many questions. So what's your take on topic X? What's your take on topic Y? Please reflect, what did you learn and what didn't you learn? How would you use something for your daily work and things like that? And I would wonder what the other panelists would be doing there in their experience when they did their first remote trainings.
Right. So I have a question. How short are the iterations that you are usually taking with people?
Well, usually I would say the content to exercise iteration or content to the participants are doing something can range between 10 minutes. Yeah, so I talk about something for 10 minutes and then let people do something. But it can also be on more complicated matters. For instance, context maps, which are not so easy to grasp at the first sight. I would go for a max of 20 to 30 minutes, but that's the exception there. And what I also do is 1 hour training, 10-minute break, 1 hour training, 10-minute break, and then also lunch break for obvious reasons.
Right, it makes sense. So for me, I also shorten the cycle time. So typically, say during the normal workshop, I would do an event storming for an hour or half an hour, something like that. If we do this in the remote setup, I usually try to keep it to 20 minutes maximum and then have short retrospectives, maybe introduce a new element to that. So you start adding, I don't know, policies, something like that. And with regards to the time itself, I'm running training now, full day block. So I'm not doing half days like many people recently started doing. But instead I do 4 blocks of hour and a half with, coffee breaks and lunch break in between them. So that's what I found is working quite well for me and my trainings. Be curious to hear what other people are doing.
So I think we so I think we took a little different approach than some or many others. I see that many others still today basically have their online trainings as they used to do them, and you can book them and then they just tell you, well, it's not going to be on site somewhere, but it's going to be online. And what we did is effectively cancel all the open trainings that we had announced. And we really got into thinking, and we pretty quickly went for the half-day format. And I'm not sure that's necessarily ideal or the only thing that we should be doing, but I figured with the pandemic going on and everybody being locked down, at least from a German perspective, it's pretty hard probably to fill a whole day of training into home office day. If you have kids floating around and family, and you have times where kids need to eat, but that doesn't sync with the trainings and stuff. So I figured that for the pandemic version of the trainings, a half day is probably a good idea, because you will be able as a person to arrange your day around that half day. But if you do a full day training, you'll have to arrange your private life around the training, which I think is pretty difficult. But then going along that line, I now think that even like jam packing a lot of content into few days, that's what we used to do. Like we did like 2 or 3 days of very intense workshops and trainings. And why did we do that? Because we had to travel. Because you don't want to travel somewhere, do half a day, hang out, and then do another half day. But now, since if you really think remote first, I think even I doubt the necessity to do full days, and maybe do even blocks. You could do like half a day, then assign exercises to the people, and then maybe come back the other day and gather them together. And I'm not sure that there's only one format that could be done and needs to be done. It kind of certainly also depends on the content that you're delivering. So with classical domain-driven design modeling stuff, people need to collaborate. When it comes to coding exercises, I think it's very valuable to give people more time to do some research, to work on their exercises. Maybe they can ping you, you can have a private conversation, you can send them emails, and then like 1 or 2 days later, you kind of come back and look at their homework. I think that's at least interesting enough to explore further, to kind of not do a formal training as a big block, but give people more time to breathe and actually require them to do more work on their own, to do more exercises and more like self-study in a mentored fashion.
Also, it's very hard to engage people even for a half a day, right? So actually, be honest. So there is your laptop. You are joining to a online meetup, or sorry, not meetup, workshop or training or whatever. But it's, you know, there are, I don't know, messages coming in, emails coming in, people lose interest, and people need to context switch all the time. And if they don't switch everything off, but not all of us doing that. So yeah, it's very hard to engage people. Actually, I'm really curious about how you are doing that. Who is doing the trainings online or remote? Because that's my biggest problem. Even when we have the modeling or training sessions online with my colleagues and with the teams at the company, it's even maybe harder because they have the same emails, same messages coming from the same people where I get the messages from. And if there is a big issue, for instance, and big problem, then everyone just context switches at the time, and then I lose everything. So not just me, but the whole training is gone then. So it's very hard from my perspective, at least. Yeah, and I don't have any good solutions for that remotely. Because if you do a training in person, it's much easier, because you say that keep laptops out from this training and okay, just focus. Mm-hmm. But you cannot do that online.
So one of the solutions that I was playing with and trying out was to work or make people work in very small groups to keep each other accountable. So I'm usually fine with having groups of 4 or 5 people during like in-person training, but doing the same thing online, I ask people to form groups of 3, maybe 4, if we cannot really form these groups. And I feel like that's working better for the reason that now to complete the exercise, almost everyone has to contribute to make progress. It's not as easy to slack off. And the other aspect of that is it's not as easy to talk over each other during the remote call, right? It's not like you can have 2 separate conversations easily in a group of 4 people. So because as I'm talking now, you are all muted. You cannot really say anything because otherwise the communication, because of the feedback delay and so on, it's not really effective. So that's what I found is working quite well for me. Working in very small groups that can keep each other accountable.
And we shouldn't forget to come back to this topic from the tooling perspective, because I'm very curious what you are using for these breakout rooms and this setup.
May I pitch in something else? What I have made the experience is that when you prepare exercises for the participants, it really makes sense to have a sort of a diversity in terms of the exercises that are being done. So you can make retrospectives, you can ask questions and have people reflect on things. Sometimes I go ahead and let people prepare something. Sometimes I have small puzzle games where I have some statements or some model elements and people should fit them together. And when you have a high degree of diversity in those exercises, I think it keeps the whole thing interesting. It doesn't get boring. And I think that also helps a lot with the engagement in my eyes as well.
I'm gonna potentially say something that people might not like, but well, if you take any regular training, you will always have a bunch of happy people and a bunch didn't really like it that much. Some were engaged, some not. Now, as Michael already said, if we are in the same room, you pretty much can tell, okay, those persons I'm losing or I've lost them. And sometimes they even tell you, let me just sit here and ignore me. It has actually happened to me. And I think online, it's more about the intrinsic motivation of people. People need to be there and willing to learn and willing to engage. And I think the ratio of how many people would we potentially lose just gets slightly higher. I don't like that necessarily, but I think that's just the way it is, because you can't, literally grab so you say, hey, let's have a coffee or have some informal conversation over coffee. So what's your problem? You're looking as if you didn't like what I said and stuff like that. And I have no concept yet of how would I translate that to online. So as of now, sadly, I have to admit that probably we'll just have to live with the fact that we lose a few more people on the way if we do stuff online. But maybe even you have different experience there. I would be curious to hear.
So what I can share that's related is that for me it was much harder to manage difficult attendees during the online training. It's especially because if I'm using, say, breakout rooms in Zoom to manage the groups, I can go to one group, spend with them 5-10 minutes, go to the other group, and during that time this group wasn't productive because there was one very disruptive person in that group and that was derailing the conversation. That's very hard to pick up, and not everyone is reporting that person straight away and so on. Or maybe they are enjoying to have a break from the training. That's also natural, right? People need change of topic or get distracted with work and so on. So yeah, I second that it's generally harder to manage attendees because we are losing this nonverbal communication, we are losing this small talks that we can have on the side and so on. So I don't have a solution, unfortunately. So
you. Sorry, I just wanted to ask. It's slightly related only here, but so you're using Zoom for the breakout rooms?
Yeah, that's right. So that works quite well. There are some minor things that I would like to improve in them. So, for example, there is no easy way to, for example, show a timer to all the breakout groups. So, say if you are using Miro and show timer in Miro, which is another software for that attender, that's fine. But I would like to have a group conversation in breakout rooms for 10 minutes. There is no really easy way to do that and manage that. You can only say, okay, I'm going to close the breakout room in 1 minute or 2 minutes or something like that. So that's one of the challenges that I found. Okay. It's not, it's not a big thing, but all these small things add up for a good or bad experience, really.
Yeah, of course.
In Zoom, there is a feature called broadcasting, and you can send a message to every breakout room if you do that, and we just send like a, 5-minute sort of message. It's very tiny apparently, because what I find difficult is the fact that I don't really know what the attendees were seeing. Like I did the broadcast, and then I was like, how does that show up for everyone? And they're like, well, this tiny green thing in the corner. So that was a bit difficult. My experience with the breakout rooms this morning was it's a bit clunky, and there can be improvements. Like it would be handy as a host if you're basically in all those conversations, but you can just mute and unmute the rooms as you would like. So if there is a tool that could do that, that would be very helpful, because now you really have to go. It's like you're teaching in 4 classrooms basically, and you have to go to every classroom. Whereas what you want is to be in one space with different groups. So you want to be able to see all the conversations still going on in your breakout rooms and just mute and unmute quickly as a facilitator.
You can work around that by using different devices. I tried that. I joined with a tablet and a mobile phone, and there I was able to do that, but it was really clunky and it didn't really work out. But there was actually an interesting question from Trond. Trond asked, how do you handle situations where Zoom is not an option? Good alternatives. I will start with that. I had a couple of those situations where customer said you must use Teams in our space, or Zoom is not allowed for all the bad press that they had. And I have, for me, one heuristic that I drew out of that was if a customer has like 5 to 6 participants in a remote training, then using the Teams thing was okay-ish. I wasn't super happy with that, but it worked out quite well, I have to say. But it was a very engaged crowd, and they were super interested in that. At another customer, I used Blue Jeans. Blue Jeans is something like Zoom, but it also has breakout rooms. It worked very well for me, but didn't work out so well for a colleague of mine. Don't know what the reason was. And then there's also Big Blue Button, which is, I think, an open source kind of thing. They also have breakout rooms, but I don't have any experiences with that, I have to say. But I must say, above 6 participants, a feature like breakout rooms where you can split up. For those who don't know breakout rooms, that's a feature where you can split up an audience of 12 folks into smaller groups for group exercises. For everything above 6 participants, that feature is, in my eyes, a total must.
And Teams is Microsoft Teams, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So from your perspective, Michael, was Blue Jeans or Zoom the winner out of these two that you used? Which one was better from your perspective? Was Zoom better or Blue Jeans better from a trainer perspective?
To be honest, I couldn't tell a big difference between the two. The only difference I noticed that, especially when I do a lot of screen sharing and so on, Blue Jeans was very resource hungry on my laptop. So the fan of my MacBook was going all day long. Yeah, but it worked. So, but in the end, I couldn't tell a huge difference, to be honest.
So I would agree that being able to use breakout rooms is very important. But I would just like to mention that you don't necessarily have to have a breakout room feature. You can kind of work around that. You can use different rooms and just like create a list and tell people, hey, now you go into that room, you go into that room, and you can join those rooms. We are using Whereby, for example, for internal communications. And for a few people, it really works decently. And even, well, Zoom was mentioned being potentially out of the question because they have that free version where you can do 40 minutes. And pretty much any of the freemium products has like a low profile free version. So you could easily set up a bunch of rooms and use them as breakout rooms. The only thing you will absolutely need is like a common chat that's ideally text-based and not part of your solution. so that you have that one communication channel that always works for everybody. So you can say, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to come back to the main room, and hey, break is going to be over in 2 minutes, stuff like that. And you can actually use a plain chat for that. And if you have everybody log into the chat and follow the chat, then that's where you can tell people what to do and where to go. And I think we are basically talking about, well, IT people or people relating to IT, so you can actually expect them to be able to like hop back and forth between rooms with different kinds of audiences that might be more difficult, like doing, well, not any, there were pretty prominent examples in Germany recently, people failing to use video conferences, but that's a different story. So I would say it's not, the breakout room feature is important, but there is a technological or a low-tech workaround for that. Mm-hmm. So if Zoom is something you can't use, you can still use something that allows breakout rooms.
Another low-tech solution would be, so Nick and I tested out the video feature of the Miro board itself. Mm-hmm. And it was just the two of us, and that worked really great. So you could focus on the board and you were chatting and you saw each other all in one screen. And I thought that was very handy. It does need some improvement. But if you're creating small groups anyway of 2 or 3 people, instead of using breakout rooms, telling them to, create a board for each group and then having them use the video and that is on the board is doable as well, I think. Like that could work too. And then you have one program where everyone is on.
But it really depends on which browser you're using there.
Go ahead.
It depends strongly on the browser you're using. I played around with that one as well, and you need a very modern browser, preferably Chrome or a latest Firefox. And even if you're on Safari or something, I already saw a couple of glitches out there, and that's something you as a trainer don't have under control, what kind of browser your participants are running, especially when they come from large enterprises.
And I think in Miro it requires the paid version, right?
Yes.
So the upside of the say the breakout rooms on the cheap is that pretty much any solution allows a low number of participants for free, and that's exactly what a breakout room is. You're going to have 3 or maybe 4 people in there. So I haven't really tried out the video feature in Miro because it's an extra, it requires the paid version, and I definitely wouldn't want to pay for Miro board just to use the video conferencing feature.
So I have a tip regarding paid Miro. So they have this consultant account or consultant package, which I find is working quite well. So I work for myself, and this consultant package is, I think, like $15 a month for myself to have all the features. And then there is a concept of day passes. So say I'm running a training for 2 days for 10 people, then I use 20 day passes, and each day pass is like $3 each or something like that. I'm not advertising, by the way. I'm just like presenting what is the option that I use that I found is quite reasonable price-wise.
I think we should mention what Miro is, because that brings us to a different question in terms of tooling. It was also which tools work best. So I think what most of the folks are using is, next to a video solution, something where you can do collaborative online work together. So there are various tools for that on the market, stuff like Concept Board, Mural, Miro. I think the latter one is currently, at least among the folks I'm working with together, the most popular one. But there is also a very low-tech solution by Google out there. I don't know the correct name right now. Maybe someone can pitch that in. And I think that's something that you also need in a training for all of those exercises. Now, let me ask in the round, what kinds of tools in terms of those, I would say, collaborative online modeling tools or collaborative online working tools, what are you folks using? I go all the way with Miro. Any other ones?
Basically, for me, it's also, oh, sorry, I just wanted to mention, basically, for me, it's also Miro and Mural, and also InVision, where you can sketch and board and whatever, use the freehand drawing and everything. But I especially like in Mural, and maybe Miro is the tool for that as well, which can facilitate these kind of voting activities and these typical activities you almost always do in a collaborative session. It supports it pretty good. I mean, pretty well. So like the voting activity, and now this is the latest example for me what I've used Mura for, and it went really great. So it engages people, and it's a great feature there. Maybe Miro does the same. I'm not really familiar with that. If that's it, I always used Miro free edition. So, and really don't like that it got renamed from real-time board, because it's a very similar name to Mural, and I always need to like speak it slowly, like Mural or Miro. Anyway, so I'm using these kind of tools.
Can you type in the address into the Zoom chat, please, so that everyone can access that?
Sure thing.
Thank you. So before we go, we also have a comment from YouTube, and I don't want to miss that. Frank is saying, what about tools like Discord? They can have multiple voice video rooms and allows screen sharing. Used a lot in gaming, and basic usage is free. Just wanted to write out. I have no experience with Discord, so I can't comment on that.
I haven't used that either. Is that Discord?
Yeah, discord.com, I think.
Okay.
What we use in university courses is Blackboard, and I think it's something similar. So I have only a participant experience there. It's a bit more, I think it's a lot more difficult to use it the way that, we're using the tools now, because it's a paid solution and you sort of need to set up this whole thing. But if you have if your company has a remote team, it might make sense to invest in something like that. To follow courses online with a teacher that has a sort of, PowerPoint, it works really well. There's a video and a chat involved. It does need a lot of education. I noticed that a lot of the professors in our courses did not have a good training and were not really well, didn't know how everything worked. So there's probably a lot more that you can do with it that I am aware as a participant. So if you're like a remote company, maybe that actually might be a solution, but I'm not sure.
I can suggest, and I also don't have any experience with Discord. I have heard of it, but I haven't used it, so I couldn't really comment on that. But I have another low-tech suggestion. So, and that may not fully apply here, because I usually don't do remote modeling like collaboratively. That's what I've always avoided. That was when I always said, let's get into the same room. But I do, as in working with my colleagues, I do quite a bit of that. And for that purpose, we have found that it also works to just, I don't know if you can see that, you have a flip chart back there. And then I have microphone stand and adapter, and that's an old tablet attached here. And I just use that one without the audio and use it as a camera. And I can either use it to show me drawing something on a plain sheet of paper, or I can turn it and it shows like a camera, it shows the board, and I can do some drawing, or I can work with sticky notes. And I found that with 2 or 3 people that are familiar with each other, it's actually okay to say, hey, can you move that there? And can you do this? So you basically have one person who's moderating the board and does the physical movements. I totally understand that that's probably not going to work out of the box for a group of foreigners or a large group, but for a small group, and if you're working with your colleagues, that actually might work out better than you would expect.
So we had a comment on, thank you, Stefan. We had a comment on YouTube that Łukasz is using Discord with his team on daily basis, and he recommends that. And for workshops, he's using Zoom. So we have some people in the community using Discord. And we also had another question and comment from Trond on Zoom, and he was asking about Jitsi. They don't have breakout rooms, but creating rooms is just creating a URL on the fly. Again, I don't have experience with Jitsi, so that's another thing for me to check out. But anyone?
No.
We used Jitsi a while ago and then switched from Jitsi to Whereby. And basically both are just WebRTC. So for a small number of attendees, the server actually just does the connection for the peer-to-peer networking that is done. It's really good with, say, up to 4 people. It doesn't scale that well. There is an option to do a server-based communication for up to 12 people in Whereby. And again, I'm not advertising, I'm just telling what I'm doing. It's working okay-ish. I'm not super happy with it. You have dropouts, you have connectivity problems every once in a while. And I hear that Jitsi has improved quite a bit. We have switched from Jitsi because it didn't work well. And we did some remote stuff with Europe and US, for example, and it kind of worked, but not really well. It did work better than the expensive video conferencing solutions these enterprises had. That's funny. But so I could not comment on how Jitsi is doing these days. It's definitely worth a look at. And I hear that they have improved quite a bit recently.
Thank you.
Let me pitch in another question to you folks. How do you prepare your exercises? Do you usually work with a blank Miro board? Do you have something pre-prepared for that? How do you do that?
So what we did is we had a couple of solo exercises and everything was set up this morning. Like, everyone had a sort of personal workspace on a shared board, and they wrote their name next to the prepared space so that we knew a bit, where everyone was. And then we had the boards ready for the group exercises. So everything was pretty prepared. What we also did was cover up the next exercise so that people didn't get distracted from the current one. And then every time we moved to the next exercise, they could delete the box and then see what was underneath it. Try to keep a bit of focus. And we arranged it. So we had a center where our domain stories were, and where we had some introduction slides and stuff like that. And then sort of in a circle around it, we set up all the participants' personal workspaces. So it was a bit of a circle hub. And I really, really liked that. It was sort of, if you zoomed out, it was a really nice feeling on the board. Everybody was tied together.
So preparation is really about, in this case or these kind of cases, preparation is really about how to structure your board the best, right? To fit the different teams. Yeah. Yeah, Miro works very well for that.
Mm-hmm. So I have to sorry. So I wanted to say that I have a bit of a different take or experimenting that I'm doing at the moment. And it's like, I know we are doing this training in the virtual space, but from my perspective, any type of change during the workshop that we can do from this routine of just looking at the screen and maybe typing and talking to people, I think it's good. For that reason, for example, for my last training, I sent people the day before the whole workbook so that they can print it out and have in front of them, take physical notes, because I think that's also important, improves the learning itself. It's also something that they don't have to, frantically change the windows to find, okay, where is the screen with that person is sharing, or where is the explanation of the exercise. They can easily have it in front of them. So for now, I'm still experimenting. I don't have a definitive yes or no if it's a good or bad solution. But I always like to, change the interactions with during the training, and constantly looking at the same screen and board and so on. It's not good from my perspective. So even a small thing like, okay, I have to pick up a pen, write something down, and so on. For that, I feel like that might improve the training experience. I don't have a good answer yet, but that's my experiment at the moment.
Did anyone try analog exercises of you folks during a training, that you say, okay, draw something or sketch out a model on a piece of paper, take a picture with your smartphone and upload it, or hold it into the camera or something?
So I ask, for example, people to write 2, 3, 4 ideas or facts down on their own without sharing with other people, so that they have opportunity, to work through the topic with them, and then share it with the other people on the call. That's one of the analog exercises.
So I don't think I can be of an awful lot of help with that question, because we don't necessarily run those classroom-based standardized trainings, but we do more of workshop styles, and we tend to use the actual code and the actual problems that the companies, the customers have as examples. So we try to work hands-on at the stuff. So obviously with that, I'm out of luck preparing any exercises, but when it comes to doing exercises online, I think my observation is that with a presence training, you can always have some chaos and just throw something at them and see what happens. And after a few minutes, you can sort of guide them along the lines of something, which may be what you have envisioned, which may be something different. And I have had some serendipities with that, actually. And online, I think that doesn't work that well. So you have to keep those exercises simpler and more structured.
So we have a comment from YouTube from Łukasz again. So what he said is that during the online training, he has a Kanban board on Miro, and each participant has its own card for the exercises. And when people move things to done, that's how he knows that everyone is done. Or it isn't. I think it's a nice tip. And
that's a cool idea.
Okay, we have 18 minutes left on this panel, by the way.
So what should participants look out for? I'm pretty sure the audience that is listening, a couple of folks are consultants, trainers, I would say. Others, maybe folks looking for a training and are unsure if they should do a remote training and so on. What do you think that someone who wants to book a training should look out for? Because I think there is a very big, I would say, diversity in the market, from, I would say, rather low cost trainings to other offerings that are very sophisticated and more expensive. What's your take? What would you say as a trainer or a consultant, what people should be looking out for when they choose a training offering?
That's a very hard one, I think. I mean, obviously feedback, but but that's hard.
From my perspective as a trainer, what I observed is that a rule of thumb for me is that if it's just me running an in-person training, I don't want to have more than 12 people in the room. That's my rule of thumb. And that's what I started with when I was doing remote trainings. But I very quickly noticed that 12 is way too much for a single person to facilitate and moderate during an online session. So I think actually for 12 people, if possible, I would like to have 2 people moderating, going between breakout rooms and so on. So from the participant perspective, you can ask, the training provider, okay, how many people will be attending this training session? How many facilitators or trainers will be on this session? And if you hear that it's a lot people per single trainer, that would be a warning sign for me, because then it means it's probably just like slide reading or so very offline exercises. That would be one heuristic to use and look out for. I don't know if you share this opinion, but that's one of the things I notice, like from my perspective as a trainer.
I would agree largely. And I think it's hard to answer Michael's question because I think there are multiple answers based on who are you and what are you looking for. So I think there is multiple reasons why somebody would look for a training in general. Now, if you are a beginner in some field, then a different training, maybe with a less experienced trainer, may be completely sufficient for you to kind of introduce you to the topic. If you are more advanced, then I think you should be looking for a mentor, somebody that mentors your own learning process. Maybe a classical training format is not even ideally suited for that. And I would generally look for somebody you feel comfortable with working. Luckily, most of the better known trainers and consultants, you can just Google them and they'll come up and you're gonna see videos and recordings and stuff. So you can get an idea of how do they work, how do they sound? Am I compatible with that person? And if you're not, just don't go for that person because you're probably not gonna have a good time. And then if you're compatible, I would urge everybody to maybe work with somebody that surprises you, maybe somebody that has different views than you have. So let your views be challenged. That's part of the learning process. You don't want to have somebody who tells you what you already know and kind of say, well, I'm the expert because I knew that. Well, I didn't really learn anything new. That's the typical feedback you get from these kind of people. And then there is that other thing when you get the feedback like, whoa, that was mind-blowing, not because everything you told me was new, but because you inspired me to think in different ways and you inspired me to see things differently now. And I think this is what a really good high-level training should be. But at least those two different groups, and there's probably more in between. So I wouldn't even try to come up with that definitive answer. I think it's about customer segmentation, basically.
Are you guys regularly asked for feedback after the training?
I do that all the time. I finish every remote training that I do with a prepared board in Miro. And the questions that I ask, let me quickly look it up. One question that I ask is, would you do this training again in a remote fashion, or would you rather prefer the in-person one? And I so far I did 6 remote trainings, and I didn't have had a single participant who said, "Nah, I'd rather go for the in-person one the next time." That was a very interesting feedback that I got, and I was really surprised by that. Yeah, because of course there are uncertainties. Is the remote one a good thing? And apparently, based on the feedback from the participants, there was a lot of happiness with that. Then I ask general comments, and just a second.
Yeah, okay. Because these feedback, yeah, okay. So these feedback can really help for participants to, just make sure that not which training to choose, but whether to choose that particular training or not.
Yeah. And I also do a keep and try. So what should I, as a trainer, keep in the training? Do you have any ideas what you could try out in the training? Do you have a great idea for a new exercise, for organizational matters? What would you try? And I always like to ask those questions in a positive way. So not what didn't you like? So hey, what are the other options? And then I ask, compared to an in-person training, where did you see the advantages of the remote version? And what didn't you like so much about the remote version? The most answer to the latter one is a beer at the bar. And that's like, that comes up every time. But what I try to do is I always give the participants on the second day the chance, hey, if we want to have a drink at I call it the Zoom bar, let's meet after the training. Everyone gets a drink of their choice, and we can socialize and chat a little bit together. Some groups say, hey, that's really great. Others say, oh, no, my mind is already really done, and I just want to get away from the computer and go for a run or something like that, or for a hike. And yeah, that's what I usually ask.
We had another comment on YouTube
Yeah.
regarding the qualities of a good remote training, and Łukasz is saying that he would like to get a trainer from practitioner that is not a full-time trainer. So basically, a person that has a real world experience, not just doing trainings all the time, all day long.
Yeah, that's also something I would ask. Another question that I would ask, I thought your thing, Kacper, was really interesting. I usually do 12 persons also in a remote training. But a question I would ask, what do you do in order to make sure that you're not losing anyone? Yeah. So how do you deal with that? And my way of working with people who are, when I have large groups, is that I really have very, very short intervals where people reflect on things, where I go back and do retrospectives and I ask questions and let them rethink those things. And my experience is that this even works out well with larger groups.
What we have been, we also limited the amount for the virtual workshop that we're creating, and we're also being very open with the material that we're making. So we really post it on Twitter and ask, how do you think that looks, and show it off to show people that we're really, this isn't just this workshop that we now temporarily going to do online, but that it really is a virtual first, so that we're really putting a lot of time and effort into, giving the same quality as it would be if you do it in person. And I don't know if other people feel comfortable about that, but as an advice to trainers, that if you show how that you really are trying to give high quality, that will convince the participants as well. But if you keep everything sort of hidden, it's very hard to see whether or not what they will learn, and they might be more reluctant to sign up for one.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I agree to the point. However, with my, maybe that's the way I work. I like to be very flexible on the content. So depending on the questions and the interests of the people, we might end up doing slightly different things than originally the agenda had planned for. And that's the one thing where I'm kind of reluctant to hand out material, because I don't want to end up in the situation where people say, hey, so there was that part in the material which we didn't cover. And then you're gonna say, well, yeah, you made a choice sometimes I even tell them, we can talk about that. We're gonna leave out something else then and cut it a little short. And I think one of the downsides of having that fixed structure, you have to at least manage the expectations. Let's put it in a positive way. You have to tell people, so this is what we might be doing. We might be doing different things. So this is not like you can tell me that wasn't in there, I'm not happy because exactly that part didn't show up. Well, you should have asked for it then. So a lot is even online, a lot is about the interaction and people. And I think maybe that's an important message to everybody ever attending a training or something similar. It's you guys shaping the training. It's your questions. It's you're steering the whole thing. If you are asking questions, then you're gonna get the person off, like, tell us about a project where that happened, and you're gonna have a fun story for a couple of minutes going on where you can learn a lot. So I think that's the most important thing. It also ties back to having a trainer with actual hands-on experience, because then you will be able to share some of those war stories and say, okay, I really tried that one out and it didn't work totally. Then maybe I tried that one and it really went well. And it's not just because I've read that in some book. I really failed with that one. I can tell you, don't do that. So,
yeah.
Yeah, maybe besides this, I mean, maybe besides these shaping training and flexible one, we can also provide some like self-exploratory kind of e-learning material thing next to the training. So attendees can afterwards maybe just look into it, like learn something in an e-learning kind of way. And they feel like there is still the material they need to learn about, but the training was like, it could be like you mentioned, Stefan, so like it can go into different directions, right? So according to the moment.
So we had a comment again from Łukasz from YouTube saying that he does 1 hour trial with the group before the training to show them how it's going to work. So I think that's also a good sales technique to convince people who like internet. And he also gave us +1 for broad agenda with fluid insights. Okay, we have 4 minutes left. Are there any topics that we were planning to discuss, Michael?
Well, I would say, first of all, if there's questions from the audience, it's now the last chance to raise them with us. I would say, in terms of the topics, I think most of the planned ones we did discuss. So we discussed suitable performance times for remote trainings. We talked quite a bit about tools. Regarding do's and don'ts, I think we had a couple of those. Which exercises work well, which don't. I think we had also some discussion about that. How to spread theory and practice in a remote environment. I think we touched upon that. And what should potential participants look out for when choosing between remote training offerings. So basically from our planned topics, I think we had most of them. I would say as a closing thing, we could go for a closing round now. My experience is that remote trainings, when prepared well, really work well. I have to say, that's one of the feedbacks that I have received so far, and also as a trainer. I think they are harder for the trainer than doing an in-person training. After 8 hours of remote training, I'm usually totally done with the day. But I think you have more opportunities on the learning level, on the exercise level, than you do when you just come around with a bunch of sticky notes and a wall. And you also have a very controlled environment with all those tools. Yes, you need to monitor them, but I think they can be a really great learning experience in my eyes. How about you, Zsofia?
Actually, what I learned now is that, so I very rarely ask for feedback if that's about modeling and training my colleagues or teams. Mm-hmm. So I want to change that, and I really want to get feedback, even if that's just a normal daily modeling session, because we do that as well, because we could learn a lot from that, and also we could improve how we do remote sessions, remote trainings, right? So that's my takeaway now.
Gien, what's your take?
My takeaway, like what I've noticed right now, is that we're still very much in the mindset of the way training in person happens. Like it's a 2-day block, or it's a 4-hour 4-day block, or something like that. And with my experience as trying to get a master's degree, is that now that you have the e-learning sort of booting up, I hope that other formats happen. For example, it's a month and you sort of go through it on your own pace, and then there are hours where you can meet up and ask questions, and that, because I think it will reach a different audience. It will reach an audience that, for example, just can't have 2 or 3 days off. So if we offer those type of e-trainings as well, we might be able to offer quality to a larger crowd. And I hope that, you know, I'm very excited to see how this evolves.
Any final words from Kacper or Stefan? Because I think we've already reached our time limit.
Right. So I just want to say that I'm looking forward to, you know, to all the developments that future will bring. I think we'll get better tooling. And I also think now that I'm starting to work on new trainings, not just translating the old trainings that I had into a remote environment. Now that I'm starting to work on new ones, I do it remote first, and it also brings new insight. And I think it will also feed back to the way I do normal training. So that's me. Thank you for the panel. So Stefan.
Well, I still have to become friends with online trainings because fundamentally I never thought they would really work. So now the world forces them upon us. But what I really think is a big chance is that the pace is going to be different. So rather than cramming stuff into a couple of days, like you can't learn domain-driven design in a week. You can attend a course a week long, but that's going to blow your mind basically. So it needs time, and people need to put in more time. So the upside is now we can allow for more time because we can have smaller segments because there is no travel. But then, well, for me, the upside is that people have to invest more time because they have to work and they have to study in between. And then we're going to look at the results. So I think it's going to be more self-learning with mentoring versus the classical traditional training. And I'm starting to realize that doing that stuff online opens the possibilities to do that. Whereas in the past, with getting on site and coming back, that really didn't work that well. And thanks everybody for hanging out with me. It was a joy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was very fun.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
just a reminder, virtual DDD, Slack channel on DDD Secure SES, and a hashtag on Twitter. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, please ask on either of these channels. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.